Hey, Breakthrough crew, welcome to Breakthrough with Mallory and Julie. We are really excited about this episode because we're going to do something a little bit different. We have been asking you, our listeners, for questions and ideas and topics and engagement, and y'all have absolutely shown up and shown out, and we appreciate it. What we've discovered is that we have quite a few questions that are all very similar, that all kind of revolve around the idea of communication and how do we handle more difficult or dicey communication when we feel like we're being confronted or it's difficult. What do we do in those situations? So we thought, what better way to answer all of those than to take, and we actually pulled some of the questions that you've asked, and we're going to just dive in and we're going to talk about communication and communicating through difficult and dicey. My name is Julie Birch with Julie Birch Speaks. I'm a speaker, author, podcaster, and my whole mission in life is what I call my war on self-abdication. My goal is to take ownership, agency over self, and empower others to lean into your own power. And what a better message for this topic than that. So I think we're right on the right track. I'm excited.
Me too. Hey, everybody. This is Mallory Heron, wife, mom, speaker, author, CEO, podcaster. Also, I love dogs. And
Yay.
Welcome to Breakthrough with Mallory and Julie. It's time to join our war on self-abdication and join the movement, because this is not just a podcast. It's a mindset and it's a movement.
Yes.
So thank you, everybody,
yes.
for the questions. It's so cool to see them all coming in. So we're going to start with one from Jason in Orlando. He said, "My manager spoke to me in a way that felt really dismissive in front of others. I froze and didn't say anything, but now I'm mad about it. How do I address it without making it a bigger issue?"
Oh boy. I'll tell you, if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me a question similar to that, I would be rich. That's actually more common than you think. I'll tell you what I hear that for me, kind of the thing that stands out is the idea that it's the boss. And I think what we need to understand is, first and foremost, I would never tell anyone I'd never share or teach communication techniques that you can't use with a boss. I'm all about respectful in my communication. So although I will teach you how to stand up for yourself, I will teach you how to, good comebacks and all of that, but I'm also about understanding respect. So I think the first thing is recognizing that really what changes is not necessarily the technique, but it's the tolerance level. And I do think for most people, whether we think it's right or not, we have a different tolerance level for a boss than we would a coworker. If, it was your coworker that was talking smack, you'd probably be pretty quick to say something, but when it's the boss, we feel different. What you said, though, is that it's made you mad and now you want to say something. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So I think talking to them after, I would definitely start by scheduling a time, meaning don't just drop in and say, "Hey, do you have a second? I have a quick question," or "I want to talk to you about something." I would prefer that you started it by saying, "Hey, Mr. Boss," or whatever, "I have something I'd like to talk to you about. I expect it's going to take about 10 or 15 minutes of your undivided attention. When would be the best time to do that?" So I'm going to set it up for undivided attention. This is something important that I want to talk to you about, and it's going to take 10 or 15 minutes. When is the best time to do that? So I would start with that. Once they say, "Oh, well, this is when we can do it," I would start by saying, I've noticed something that has occurred multiple times, and I'm confused by the meaning, and I wanted to talk to you about it. And I would be as specific as I can. In this situation, this comment was made. In this situation, the comment was made. In this situation, the comment was made. So you're being specific about what was said, and you're showing a pattern. Then I would say, "To me, that sounds," how does it sound to you? Does it feel like they're being demeaning? Does it feel like they're dismissing you? Whatever, own it. It feels like you're actually dismissing me, and it makes me uncomfortable, especially in front of my coworkers. Is that your intention? Am I misreading that? And you're giving them a chance to get out of it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's highly probable that what they're going to say is, "Oh, of course not. That's not what I meant." That doesn't mean that they're totally off the hook, because that for me means that I'm going to come back with, "I'm so glad that I misread it. Can I then assume going forward that those comments won't be made anymore, that I don't have to worry about those comments happening again?" so that I'm kind of restating the boundary, restating kind of my conditions of satisfaction, if you will. So that's something that I would think about. That's how I might try to approach it. What do you think?
Oh, you're spot on. I think it's really natural to, especially when you're dealing with a boss, you don't want to rock the boat. And I hear it in HR all the time. Someone was like, well, this thing happened. I didn't like it, but I don't want to make it a big deal. Can we just I just told you and we're good. Well, no, depending on what it is, I'm going to have to say something to someone, but I'm always going to do what I can to make you feel empowered to go advocate for yourself. And a lot of conflict is a result of miscommunication, and we read into stuff that's
right.
not even there. And I see this too happen a lot with employees say, well, so-and-so doesn't say hi to me when they came in this morning. And so they assume that means this person is upset with them in some way, and maybe it was because of the work that they turned in, when it could just be that person was thinking about, oh yeah, I got to go get an oil change after work. Totally unrelated. So getting clarity on the communication is an essential step as part of it so that you can avoid the conflict that comes from the miscommunication. And yeah, most people, they didn't mean anything by it, but they wouldn't know unless you say something.
I think that absolutely is true. I think getting clarity is the key. It doesn't have to be an accusation. When you go in and say, you should never say that, you should never talk to me like that, you can't do that, then it creates anger and it creates emotion and people get defensive and it's accusing. But if you approach it instead from the point of clarification, I think it sets you up for a better return.
Yeah, don't get in your boss's face. Don't become belligerent. Stand up for yourself, but time and place.
Right. One last thing, and then we'll go to our next question that struck me when you said that about bosses, that's the other thing with bosses is that if we don't, we would go to somebody to maybe advocate for us, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But my goal in life is to never to not make it so that you have to go to someone else to advocate for you, but to give you the tools to advocate for yourself. And if it's the boss that's the problem, who are you going to go to, right? So it is important that you have the ability to speak up and to say something. So this is our next question. This is actually from Priya. I think I'm saying that right. In San Jose, California. I'm a California girl by birth, actually. And this was what she says. I struggle to speak up for myself in the moment, especially at work. By the time I process what happened, it's too late. How do you get better at advocating for yourself? We were just talking about that without overthinking it. Oh, that's a great question. What do you think?
Well, as a certified overthinker, I have been there. I think that, again, clarity is really important. So other people aren't going to be able to read your mind. They're not going to know what you need. And we read into stuff. So you have to be able to say to people, this is what I need. So first you have to start with identifying it. What is it that you need? What is it that happened that you're not thrilled about, so that you can bring it to someone's attention in a professional way? What do you think?
I agree completely. I do think it goes back to what we said about clarification. I think you have to be specific. You have to be able to speak up. One of the things that happens when people get uncomfortable is that their communication becomes all over the place. So instead of saying specifically, this is something that I struggled with when this comment was made, this is how it made me feel, or this is what I thought. We say, well, I'm sure you didn't mean anything by it. I'm probably overreacting, and I'm probably, me, I always, I just take everything so personally, and I'm so sensitive, and I don't mean to be, so it's probably not that, but I'm just saying, shut up, get to the point. When this was said, this is how I felt. And the other thing that I encourage people to look at, and this is, it's one of those little communication things that I think can make such a big difference in how it comes across, is I always look for when this, when that, when the, as opposed to when you. When you, then we're making it about them. I always try to encourage people to think that it's not the person you don't like, it's the behavior that you don't like, it's the comment. You may not like them either, but you can't tell them that. So we focus it on the behavior, not on the person. So if you can use instead when this, when that, when the, then I think it puts you in a better situation.
Absolutely. And it's the specificity really helps. Mm-hmm. If you just say, I don't like the way you talk to me.
Right.
Okay. What is it about the way I'm talking to you? You have to be very specific. And having the opportunity to come back when you have had some time to think about it that can be very helpful. You can rehearse what you want to say. You can take notes and make sure like, okay, I'm not going to bring your notes with you if you think you're going to forget what you want to say. The ability to go back after the fact, it doesn't mean that you're less than when it comes to advocating for yourself. You're still doing it. And sometimes in the moment, that is where things are going to get escalated. To your point, if you are focusing on the person, not the specific thing that happened, but you did this, it's you're always this way. Well, you're going to escalate it and they're going to get defensive. And now no one is going to be able to find any resolve because you're fighting.
Exactly.
To de-escalate things, you make it very objective. It's not this person as a person. You get specific, and coming back later to talk about it after you've had some time. Look, go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, Chat, this is what I really want to say. How do I say that in a professional way?
Or send Mallory and I a message, and we'll discuss it on a podcast.
Yeah.
There you go. One of the things that I think is important to note, because I think Mallory's right, that it's okay to approach things after. Oftentimes it can be better. You don't want to in the heat of the moment when you're frustrated or you're flustered. So coming back to it later can be a good thing. There is a caveat to that, though. There's a time limit of how long you have before it's pointless and ridiculous for you to be bringing it up again.
13 months ago, you hurt my feelings.
Exactly. And people will wait. They store it all up. And then one day, that's it. They're done. And they blow. And they want to go through everything you've said or done over the last 12 months. Unacceptable. So my general rule of thumb is 48 hours. You have 48 hours to calm yourself down, to let them calm down if they need to, and to decide how you're going to approach it, what you want to say, and what you expect to get from that conversation. What is it you're looking for when you point this out to this person? When you tell this person that you had a problem with what they said, what is your goal? Do you want an apology? Do you want clarity on why they said it? Do you want them to change their behavior? The more that you're clear on what your expectation for the result of that conversation is, it's going to set you up for better results. So you don't have to say it in the moment, but you can't wait forever. Don't let it pile up, because the longer you wait, the more you're going to go to them and say, when you said that, they're going to say, when did I say that? I don't even remember. So it has to be in a reasonable amount of time. I'll tell you another tip, and this is something that with practice anyone can learn, because if you listen to what Priya said, like the specific question, that is she struggles to speak up in the heat of the moment, right? In the moment, by the time she processes, it's too late. So how do you get better about advocating? I will tell you that if you can have a default question, a default technique that you just kind of keep in your holster, ready to go, right? So when you are flustered, right, that becomes the emotional poke, right? And I try to shy away from saying trigger. I like poke. So you get poked. You get poked. They said something, it poked you. Your brain said, danger, danger. I hate that. What do you mean by that? And we start to kind of react. We feel the emotion. A default, like in your holster, ready to go kind of a question. That was an interesting point. Tell me more about what you mean. Help me to understand your position. Wow, that's not what I was thinking. Help me to understand where you're coming from. And when you have that default question, you can use that question for anything anybody said. Memorize it, practice it, like say it when you're driving to work, when you're lathering up in the shower, practice saying the question or using those words. And then when that poke happens, you train yourself that becomes, in the heat of the moment, that becomes the question. So you feel like you're addressing things at the moment rather than feeling like you have to wait and say something after. You can wait, but if you want something to say in the moment, if you want to be able to address it in the moment, that default question can be super helpful.
And there's things you can do to buy yourself more time in the moment and get, when you feel flustered, when you're anxious, when you're emotional, you're trying to figure out what this message means. It's hard to think about what do I want to say? So having that question ready to go is so valuable. But also sometimes you got to get to a point where you can even remember, oh yeah, I have this question. So take a pause and look, it can just look like you're thinking, you're like really pondering those questions. Take a sip of something. There's little things that you can do to kind of like re-regulate your nervous system. That could also be like just a little bit of movement. So wiggling your toes, changing which legs crossed if you're sitting down, little things like that. Kind of, they send this signal to your nervous system like, oh, we need to calm down now. And then once you are calmer, you have more of your faculties to think about the situation and say, okay, now I want to ask this question. And it's a great question. And look, if you ask someone an open-ended question, they will talk about it. People love to talk. It's not their fault. That's just how we're all wired. And when you're asking more questions, you have the opportunity to get more clarity. And that's really helpful.
I agree.
From Lauren H. in Denver, something happened at work where I felt disrespected in a meeting, but I didn't say anything in the moment. Now it's bothering me. How do you stand up for yourself after the fact?
Well, I think we've talked about that. I think hopefully Lauren feels like what we've said to this point answers that question for you. I would add one thing to it that I think we can remind our listeners of, because I think this is true for everybody. And I don't know where I heard the saying, but I love it. When you don't speak up in an attempt to keep the peace, you're really just keeping the tension. Nobody wants to live with that tension. And that tension is what builds and builds until we get to that tipping point where now we're acting out, we're lashing out, we're losing our cool when we need to maintain our composure. So it's better to address issues when things are smaller. And again, going back to the question can be so powerful to give you a way that you can kind of keep it in the moment, that we're not letting things build on each other, because the more that they build, we risk that explosion, right? You keep pushing it down, push 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 it down. I promise you, if you keep pushing it down, eventually it's going to squirt out. And generally when it squirts out in weird and awkward ways. So our ability to communicate effectively over time becomes extremely important. So don't not speak up to keep the peace. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, when you let something fester, eventually you're going to hit your limit, and then you become an HR problem.
Right.
And you don't want that. When you are able to,
right.
take this with some maturity and handle it, that's a much easier route instead of bottling it up. And I really believe that you teach people how to treat you. So if you aren't addressing it sooner rather than later, then you're getting someone accustomed to, this is just the way that we talk to each other. This is what I can expect of this person. And then it becomes a shock to that person when you've waited quite a while. Right. And then they're like, what do you mean? I thought we were cool.
Right. One of the things that I hear periodically, and I think it's interesting, is that people will say, well, my boss should not allow that. My boss should speak up. My boss should say something. And my response to that is always, yeah, okay, sure. But again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning, that I want you to be able to advocate for yourself. Should the boss, because I do believe the boss allows and sets the standard for how we treat each other, right? We always say we're a respectful environment. We're professional. We treat people respectfully and professionally. Well, those kind of underhanded comments, the offensive comments, the negativity, those are not in line with what we would consider team values. And we do tend to look at the leadership to say, is this something we're allowing? And of course, if I was, speaking to a leadership team, I would say, don't allow it. But I also feel like the bigger lesson, the more important thing, is that you have to be able to speak up. You have to be able to say something and not just look to everybody else to defend you. I want you to be able to defend yourself.
Yet the boss is not a mind reader, and they've got competing priorities a lot of the time. They're focused on something totally different. And everyone, this sounds awful, but I don't mean it. Everyone's out for themselves.
That's
because
true.
No one else is doing it for you. You have to become your own best advocate, and you can't assume that the boss knows things or thinks you're okay with something.
You are responsible for your own boundaries. You are responsible for what is acceptable and not acceptable around you. And I think that's a key to understand. I think that it's not your boss's job to set your boundaries. It's not your boss's job to enforce your boundaries. It's your job to set the boundary. It's your job to enforce the boundary. And that means when the boundary's crossed, it's up to you to speak up and say something. And that doesn't mean that we yell and scream and get mad. We don't lose our emotional cool.
Keep it professional.
Right. Be tactful. But I think that there's actually so much power in being able to remain tactful in difficult situations. I mean, it feels really good. I will tell y'all, and I say this with so much love. I mean, really, truly, when I say lovingly kick you in the mindset, that I promise you, I have not always been good at this. I teach emotional intelligence. I talk about communicating through conflict. To this day, when I tell my sister I'm teaching emotional intelligence, she laughs and says, "Are you teaching it or are you taking it?" So it is a learned skill. And I promise you, if you put some effort into it, you can learn it too. Okay, let's bring in another question because I think this allows us to keep the conversation going and even incorporate a few more communication techniques or tips. So this is actually from Eric in Nashville. I'm excited. We've got a couple of dudes. So this is what Eric says. There's someone at work who keeps crossing the line with comments, and I keep letting it slide to keep the peace. At what point do you say something, and what do I say?
Immediately.
Right.
Immediately you
So
say
many thoughts
something.
on this one.
Yeah. Like, and I get it. Some people just have a bad day. And so you don't want to just like confront people because you're getting to know each other. You're getting to know how each other works. And everyone is entitled to a bad day. Shit happens. We don't want to be judged for our bad moments on our bad days. But you do teach people how to treat you. So if someone, depending on, I guess, the severity, if someone said something to you that for you personally really crossed the line, speak up immediately. And if you can't speak up to that person, you can find go to HR and find an avenue there, but it needs to be addressed. And I would encourage you to address it yourself. Interestingly, I do a lot of like sexual harassment investigations and some discrimination investigations. By and large, the shit that gets said that someone makes a complaint about, that person had no intention. They had no idea. They feel awful about it. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And I encourage people, if you feel comfortable, tell that person, hey, I didn't like that. That wasn't okay. Please don't do it again. And most people, when you do that, not a problem.
Right.
Didn't know, won't do it again.
I'll tell you, one of the ways I've tried to use myself and I've tried to teach others is when somebody says something that is offensive or crosses the line. And it really does speak to what Mallory's saying, is that I feel like so often people don't really realize what they're doing. So my kind of go-to, my default would sound something like, hey, I'm sure you didn't mean anything by that, but what you said offended me. I would appreciate it if going forward you wouldn't use that kind of language or make those kind of comments around me again. And here's why I structure it that way. First of all, I'm giving them an out. My objective is not to argue with you about whether or not this is appropriate or inappropriate. I just want you to stop it. So I will give you an off-ramp. I'm sure you didn't mean anything by that, right? I'm also, if I'm offended, I'm going to say offended. I don't take that word lightly. I think it gets overused. But if that's what I'm feeling, you could also use uncomfortable if that is more appropriate for the situation. And then you notice, and I'm very specific about this, is that I would appreciate it if you wouldn't say that, use that kind of language, make those remarks, whatever, around me again. You want to get in a fight with someone, tell them, you should never say that. That's terrible. You are this or you are that. That's argumentative. That's a fight. And truly, I don't have to like you. I don't have to like what you say or like what you think. But what you do on your own time is your business. What you say around me is what I have control over. And I think that's important. The other thing to keep in mind is I call it the line in the sand. Everyone has a different line in the sand. So some things are more offensive to other people or less offensive to other people. And when I say offensive, again, it could be uncomfortable, inappropriate, right? That was a joke that you shouldn't have told. That was a comment you shouldn't have made. We all have a different line in the sand. So for people, and really Eric's kind of posing the question, at what point do you say something? I don't know, Eric. That's on you. You have to decide when that line was crossed. And we can all have different lines. And I use the example of cussing. I have no problem with cussing. If somebody cusses in front of me, that is not a line for me. I'm like, go on, which bad self. Cuss it up. I half the time sound like I cuss like a sailor. So I'm not offended by that. But there are people that are offended by that. If you are, then we apologize ahead of time because you're probably going to get some spicy language.
Oops.
But But some people are more offended by that. So that's your line in the sand. So you have to decide what your line in the sand is and decide when it's time for you to speak up. So to that point of the question, at what point do you say something? That's on you. You have to decide when that line for you has been crossed. Yeah. And I think that matters.
Absolutely. And I also apply a reasonable person's test to things because I am assuming intent from someone if I'm reading into something, right? So then it might be, would a reasonable person think that crossed a line, or is this a me thing? Right. It's okay if it's just a you thing, and you can still have a conversation like, this makes me, I don't like this. Can we do something different? But within reason, because you don't want to, please don't ask me for the TPS report ever again. Well, if that's part of your job, like, be reasonable about it. And if you're ever unsure, I think it's totally okay to phone a friend and find out from a colleague, hey, this is the way I'm reading this situation. Do you think, has that been your experience? And kind of workshop it together.
I love that we kind of go back to, and my hope is, and this is true for a lot of these kinds of questions. So those of you, even if you didn't write in, but these are some of the questions you have asked, you've thought of. I do think that the idea of the question and surrounding it with clarity and trying to understand. I always like to say that I'm a very assertive communicator. As an assertive communicator, I do not argue, I do not fight, and I do not confront, and I don't assume. I always check my own perception. And that's where those questions come in. Negative inquiries, where you kind of take it and turn it into a question. To me, that sounded negative. Is that how you meant it? Right? Asking the question, this is what I heard, help me to understand where you're coming from. Y'all, it's even okay, and I actually call it, my all-time favorite technique is acknowledge transition. I teach it in pretty much every single topic I teach. So if you've been in any of my sessions, you've heard me teach this, I'm sure. But it's because you can't hear it enough, because you can use it a million times, a million ways. It's where you acknowledge what they said, and then you transition to the next step, right? So it's okay to acknowledge, I don't actually agree with that. I understand that's how you feel. This is what I think. I understand where you're coming from. I disagree with it. It's okay. And I think we have to get better about that in our culture, or better about that at work and in our personal lives even. And for heaven's sake, on social media, you don't have to agree with everything everyone says. I can say to you, actually, I disagree with that. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think we could do going forward, right? So it's not always about debating. What you said was offensive. Well, I didn't think it was offensive. Well, I thought it was offensive. Well, it wasn't offensive. You're taking it wrong. You're too sensitive. Well, I'm not being sensitive. I just think that was really rude. Well, now we're fighting. If I can say, I understand you don't feel like it was offensive, but I'd appreciate it going forward if you wouldn't use that kind of language around me again. I'm setting my boundary. I'm being specific, and I'm not accusing or making any assumptions about what their intent is. All right. So can we use that communication that transitions us, not debating about whether they did or did not do, but rather what kind of boundary or parameters would we appreciate going forward?
I think that was a great example of constructive versus destructive conflict, because a disagreement, when often in workplaces, this happens when both parties actually care about the work they're doing and the outcome. So it's just a disagreement on how do we best get there. Right. That isn't a personal thing. That's, you both care. That's healthy. You have to have conflict for there to be innovation, for there to be progress. If you're just doing the same thing the same way, you don't have that. So it takes someone speaking up and saying something. But it's when you're focused on the results and the solution and disagreeing through that, that's constructive. If you change that, now you're attacking that person. Now it's destructive. Now we're not talking about the business result. We're just talking about people. Mm-hmm. And we get defensive. Our egos get involved. We get challenged. And I really do believe that one of the best things you can do is get comfortable with language kind of being that specific, saying, getting to the heart of the matter, asking the right questions, and having like a bank of questions that you have ready to go. Working through, okay, how do I professionally say this or that? Because it's all has to be within reason.
I agree. I think that the more that we come up with specifics, the more comfortable that we can become in those kind of situations.
Yeah. All right. So our last question along the same lines, this comes from Michelle in Dallas. How do you stand up for yourself at work when something feels off, but you don't want to come across as difficult? thoughts?
There are so many people out there that don't speak up because they are afraid that they will be perceived as the problem. And if you're always bringing up the problem, that shoe fits.
Come with a solution. Yeah.
That's exactly. I think it has to be more solution oriented. And I think that are you leaning in with curiosity? So how do you do it without being the one that's always bringing up the conflict or potential problems? It's leaning in with curiosity. So it goes back to questions. We've talked a lot about that. Ask the right questions and always look at it from a solution-oriented standpoint. If we do that, is this a potential that could come up? How might we handle it if it does? So we're always looking at solution and we're looking at leaning in with curiosity rather than assuming what people think or what they mean by what they say.
Yeah. You know what happens when you assume.
That's right.
You make an ass of you and me.
That's
for those that haven't heard that.
Right.
So that's a big part of it. But also, and I get it for women too, we have a bit of a double standard. So like if a man says something, he is just being, authoritative, assertive. He's strategic. When a woman says something, that person is being calculated and a bitch and difficult to work with. It's not fair, but I do believe that kind of women think about it more and they don't want to be difficult. So come with the solution. But this is a really good technique that I learned from somebody at the Department of Defense. I can't tell you who, or they'll have to kill me. So in order to get results on what you want, so you kind of create a mini business case. You bring the issue to that person. And then you say, here are 3 different solutions. Here's the one I'm recommending and why. And then open it up to them for questions. And most of the time, they'll agree with you and they will select what you recommended or just want to tweak one of the other 2. It's very much like dealing with toddlers. So, and I'm not saying that your boss is, childish or anything. It's just, I learned this as a mom and it happens all the time at work. So if I were to have asked my kids when they were that age, what do you want for lunch? Oh, I don't know. Or, well, let's have, some kind of pizza, whatever, right? Maybe I don't want to buy pizza that day. But if I ask them, hey, it's lunchtime. Do you want chicken nuggets or fish sticks? They're going to pick chicken nuggets or fish sticks. So They still get to exercise choice, but now you're collaborating together and it's not solely focused on the negative. You're working together on those solutions.
Exactly. Here's a concern I've identified. Here's something that struck me and I wanted to run it past you. I think that how we approach it, I think that if we're using the right tone, and again, leaning in with curiosity, being inquisitive, always looking for solutions and not just bringing up problems. I think that becomes, that's kind of our superpower, is that's how we have to approach it. One of the mistakes I think a lot of times people make is they wait, and you really see that in a lot of our questions that we've answered today, is that they get to the point where they get really frustrated and now I'm mad about it. Now what do I do because I'm mad about it? And the problem, and it kind of goes back to what we said, that it will build and then we lose it. So our ability to maintain our composure is our ability to, in the moment, answer the right questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And for me, I have to be mindful of it because otherwise it'll be like, my husband will say, I've kept a record of like everything that happened in like the last year. Right. You didn't take the trash out then. You left my car out of gas this time. Right. And those are smaller things, but they come so much bigger if you're not addressing them.
The longer we hold on to them, the bigger they become. And we have to be willing. I tease a lot, especially when I teach this topic, I tease a lot about how good comebacks and, Frank's going down or whatever. And because I want to arm people. I want people to feel like they have the techniques, the communication techniques, the tools to be able to handle difficult people. Not everybody has been listening to our podcast, which is a mistake. I can't understand that at all.
Tell them about it.
Not everybody, please do. Not everybody has been in a training session or a keynote or whatever. So not everybody knows. Not everybody's a good communicator. So it is on us to be willing to lean in and ask the questions and to not lose our cool and be willing to speak up. It's not about good comebacks. It's truly what high impact professional communication is all about. When we do not ask the questions, when we do not address issues, they fester. So our willingness to address things is what's healthy for relationships. That is what healthy conflict is all about. That's what healthy communication is. That's how we have effective teams, effective relationships. All of those things are rooted in our willingness just to ask, not assume, but ask. And that makes such a big difference.
And I can't say enough about having the tone, and the word choice matters too.
Yes.
If I tell you to have a nice day and I do it in a nice, lovely tone, that's great. If I say enjoy the next 24 hours, something's coming for you. I've just threatened you.
Right. Our tone, the words we choose, all the parts of the message, your facial expressions will give you away. I know sometimes people always tell me they've got a problem with their face. Change your face. You can change your face, believe it or not.
Botox. Because I have RBF, rustic bitch face. I'm sure you've seen it in the videos. I don't mean to. That's just my face.
But you can change what your facial expression is. You can't change your face, but you can certainly change your expression. And so paying attention and truly choosing, mind over matter, truly choosing to think that, that their intention, maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe my reaction is not the reality. And be willing to ask. Be willing to ask people why they're doing that or what that means. Now, I don't recommend a why question, but tell me more about it. Help me to understand. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm feeling. Help me to make sure I'm reading you right. I want to understand. I want to make sure we're moving in the same direction. So the willingness to lean in with curiosity and ask questions is huge. I have one final thought, and then you're welcome to do the same. I really do believe this, that we lose our cool in a conversation, in a conflict, in a debate, whatever it is. We lose control of our emotions at precisely the moment we run out of things to say. As long as you have something to say, you won't lose your cool. You can maintain your tone. You can maintain your emotion. It's when you feel like you get to that point where it's like, you're not even listening to me. I don't have anything to say. I don't even know what to say to you anymore. When you get to that point is when we tend to lose our cool. So you can maintain your composure by learning the questions, learning the techniques so that you have something to say and you're moving conversations forward rather than getting to that tipping point where your emotions overwhelm.
Absolutely. Empathy goes a long way as well. If you are asking genuinely, because people can tell if you're insincere.
Absolutely.
If you are genuinely asking, hey, this is what I thought in terms of how it might impact you, but please tell me. I want to make sure I've thought of all of it. And that could go a super long way when someone feels like, oh, you've put yourself in my shoes. And in terms of when you run out of things to say, now it's, you have to make sure that you are actively listening, because if you are only listening with the intent of, this is what I'm going to say next, you're not really hearing that person. And it'll start to escalate. Absolutely. It's okay to listen, pause, and then respond. Or even sometimes I've said, give me just a moment to collect my thoughts. That's perfectly fine. If you are actively listening to that person, they will want that.
Absolutely true. I love it. I hope this episode has been helpful. We had fun with this, so keep the questions coming. We're going to do our Fan Mail 5 in all of our episodes, but you never know when we may get a trend again, and we may decide to do another episode where we do all fan mail questions. So thank you for participating. Thank you to all of our people that sent them in, Eric and Jason and Priya and everybody that we got messages from. Thank you so much for that. We hope that it helps, and we look forward to hearing from the rest of you. Remember, communication is key if you want to break through.
All right. Go like, share, subscribe, do all the things, tell a friend, and make sure you submit those questions, because the next time we might be reading yours.
I love it. Bye.
Bye.
This episode is sponsored by Heron HR. the experts in full-service payroll and HR built for growing businesses. Heron HR offers a white glove experience and specifically works with small and mid-sized businesses. Their easy-to-use HRIS system comes with all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a payroll provider. Heron HR is there to take on as much or as little of your HR function as you want and need. If you're ready for a solution that scales with you, if you need full-service payroll or you just want a real HR partner, they've got you covered. Give them a call today at 1-800-607-7787 or find them online at heronhr.com.
This episode is brought to you by Julie Birch Speaks. If you want another boring keynote, keep scrolling. But if you want an experience, meet Julie. Julie isn't just a speaker. She's the moment your audience didn't know they needed. With down-home charm, a sharp sense of humor, and zero tolerance for fluff, she delivers real-world techniques that make people laugh, think, and actually do something different when they leave. Through relatable stories, bold truth-telling, and solid business strategies, wrapped in brilliant comedic humor, Julie connects in a way that feels like a conversation, not a lecture. Your audience won't be just entertained. They'll be equipped, energized, and ready to level up. Solid business strategies, brilliant comedic humor. Find Julie online at juliebirch.com or give her a call at 214-679-2717.